I was lucky enough to know what Charles was going to be talking about before I wrote this. So what I'm going to do now is follow up and describe just some of the work that we're doing on Norfolk Chalk Rivers to help them function as natural systems. So I work for Norfolk Rivers Trust. We've been in existence for just over 2 years now. I've been there just short of 9 months. And we've got 2 major projects on the go. We've got a series of big projects on the River Nar, which Charles has just mentioned, funded through the Catchment Restoration Fund, but also funded by Coca-Cola, who have an interest in the sustainable use of sugar beet, a lot of which is grown in the catchment, and also funded through the World Wildlife Fund, who have an interest in the Nar as a unique chalk stream. The project I'm working on, the 9 Chalk Rivers project, is again funded mostly through the Catchment Restoration Fund. It was a consortium bid for Norfolk Rivers Trust, the Norfolk Coast Partnership, the Norfolk County Council, Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and a couple of other partners. And we secured £1.3 million through the Catchment Restoration Fund, plus quite a bit more through various other contributions, to work on these 9 rivers across the top of Norfolk. So stretching from east to west, it's Munsey Beck on the River Mun, the Glaven, which some of you are going to come and visit tomorrow, the Stiffkey, the biggest of these 9 chalk rivers, the River Burn, which you can see over there on the 3-tier display from the Norfolk Coast Partnership, and then a series of smaller rivers around the coast, the Hun, the Heach and the Ignore, and then the Babbing and the Gaywood close to Kings Lynn. So across these rivers we've got 17 different projects at the moment. That number changes from week to week and it's keeping me busy. There's quite a variety of projects as well that we're working on here. There's no big single task. It's more a series of actions that we take to help restore these rivers. We're doing a lot of sediment trapping work, particularly on the Nar and the Glaven, to try and keep silt out of the rivers and on the fields. Habitat restoration work, I'll come on to talk a little bit more about that in a second. That's across most of these rivers, the Heach and the Babbing and the Glaven, the Stiffkey and others. And reconnecting to the floodplains. I think Charles used the expression, the erasure of the wetlands of southern England. And this is something that's quite striking when you look at these rivers, and really something that we're trying to address. We're trying to let these rivers spill back onto the floodplains where it's appropriate, and allow the floodplains to drain back into the rivers. We're also doing some pond and lake restoration work. This isn't just about rivers, it's about the wider catchment and the wider waterscape. We have a community engagement officer working in each of these catchments to try and involve people with the rivers. Public access is a big issue here. It's actually very difficult for people to see these rivers. There's very little access. And we're also doing a lot of catchment management planning for the future. So when I came down here, I didn't really know Norfolk chalk streams. It took me a little while to have a look around and gather my thoughts. But it became quite apparent, looking at these 9 rivers in particular, that they shared a common list of problems. The 2 obvious ones being water quantity and water quality. Charles mentioned abstraction, and that's a huge thing on these rivers. Not just for farming and irrigation, it's by no means just for farming. Our water consumption from these rivers is also huge. Water quality is a problem. Again, on pretty much all these rivers in various places, it tends to be diffuse pollution, so it tends to be nitrates and phosphates, nutrients rather than your old school toxic pollutants. Soil loss and sedimentation, another massive problem here, especially with potato and beet farming. We get a lot of bare ground for months, and a lot of the soil does escape into the rivers, usually via the roads. Flooding and drainage, big issue as well. Traditionally, this is all very rich agricultural land, and there's been this drive to drain it as much as possible. Flooding is a genuine concern on some of these rivers. They're not particularly large, not particularly powerful, but the Gaywood does flow straight into Kings Lynn. Various wildlife issues, we'll talk about that in a little moment. Changing climate as well, increasingly a concern for us, and a very legitimate concern, especially given the low flows, the threats to water quality. And public access, again, is an issue on these rivers, I certainly feel. So, looking at the 9 rivers, they've got these shared concerns, but also they've got shared solutions. And the solutions that I'm going to talk about are the things that we look to, first of all, when we get the opportunity to work on a particular river, stretch of river. So again, we're coming back to restoring floodplains, restoring floodplain function. And it's about using water or losing it, really. It's got a number of practical ecological benefits, not least effective water storage. But we are tending to get these long dry periods. If you let the river spill out onto the floodplain and connect to it through the river banks, that is it's an effective storage of water. It also increases massively the floodplain and the marginal biodiversity. We're starting to see this now. The River Glaven Conservation Group have been working for a few years on the Glaven, doing these projects, restoring connectivity. And in the meadows in particular, University College London have been doing a few studies over the years, and they've shown that plant diversity doubles when you allow the river to flood onto the floodplain. Invertebrate diversity comes with it, and with the invertebrates you get the birds, you get the amphibians, you get everything that should be there. It does improve water quality, it acts as a filter. The river should spill out, it should drop its silt when it spills out. The silt carries with it a lot of the nutrients, so it helps the river manage its own water quality. And it also recycles nutrients. If they're not spilling out into the floodplain, they're disappearing straight down the river and either sitting on the riverbed or going out to sea. And we can make this work for farming. This is one of the most contentious things working on these projects with the farmers, but we can make this work. We've got farmers now who are seeing they've got areas that haven't been particularly productive in the past that they have tried to crop quite heavily. We've got farmers now turning some of these back over to pasture, allowing them to flood, allowing them to wet, and they're finding that they get a guaranteed income from the grazing because there's no risk of loss of the crop to flooding. So this really can work for farming, and if we're going to continue with these projects, it has to work for farming. So at the moment we're looking at these projects on the Nar, the Glaven that some of you will see tomorrow, the Stiffkey, the Gaywood. There's some nice short stream floodplain photographs there. And the next concept, I guess, that we look at is putting the bends back in the river, re-meandering. And what this does is this creates a lot of variety of habitat where there was none. It creates diversity of flows. You've got fast water, you've got slow water, shallow water, deep water. And as Charles was saying, the dredging and straightening of these rivers has created very, very uniform channels that are suited for a very small number of species. Putting the meanders back really increases the habitat diversity there, and it improves the biodiversity. And again, we're starting to get the results from earlier projects, not by ourselves. Again, the River Glaven Conservation Group have been on work, and we're really starting to see the results there. It also improves silt management. The river should manage its own silt, it should erode, and it should deposit. And what you have when you put the meanders back is you have the faster areas and the slower areas. It'll scour through the faster areas, and you get your nice clean gravel beds that the fish need, the invertebrates need. And then you get your slower, deeper sections where the silt does deposit, and that gives you a whole different flora and fauna on the silty, slower sections. Equally valuable. There's a number of beneficiaries to the meandering. I've picked out these little creatures, I think, as a classic example of why we need this. These are brook lamprey on the Glaven, spawning. And what they need to spawn are, they need the clean gravel beds with the quicker water and the high oxygen content. But what the young lamprey need when they hatch out, they need silt beds. They drift downstream into the silt beds that equally should be there and spend their lives filter feeding there. So these are really an example of why this works. The other beneficiaries are all the things you'd associate with a chalk stream, the plant life, the fish life, trout there in particular, and the invertebrate life. Siltation is probably currently one of the biggest threats to these rivers, and again it's something that we're really working on here. It's a little bit tricky to get this exactly right. Ideally we want to stop the silt getting into the rivers in the first place. If we can't do that. We want to track it as near the source as we possibly can. And there's lots of ways of doing this. Actually building silt traps in the smaller drainage channels is very effective. That can keep tons and tons out, just from 1 or 2 fields each year. Cover crops, farms are starting to use on the bare ground, between crops. Recreating wetlands is another winner. Field margins that the catchment sensitive farming team have been promoting for quite a few years. And just moving access and storage points, it can be really simple. Farmers access tracks to particular fields. If they're in the bottom end of the field, they'll access the channel for silt. Just move it up the track a little bit, and you can solve the problem. And we've got some sediment nasty pictures there. You can see this bottom right picture in particular. You can see in the past somebody's made an effort there to do some habitat restoration work, to narrow the channel, to help the water speed through. The silt burden in this river is so great and the channel's so wide that even this narrowing effect, it's not keeping the silt out. This is after one particular heavy rain event, and even in the faster areas of the river, you can see what was a gravel bed there. Absolutely smooth. And then to follow up from the reconnection remeandering work, we've got kind of a dessert menu of other things that we can do here to help the river. Woody debris is a massive one, just dropping trees into rivers. You do need permission to do this, I should point out. And it is pretty much as simple as it sounds. You can see on the photograph there, the tree's gone in, the water's got to find a way under or around it. When it goes around it, it's speeding up on the far end of the picture. When it goes under it, it'll dig out a pool. And what you get again is that habitat variation and silt management. You'll see where the water speeds up, it'll instantly start to clean the river bed underneath it. I mentioned that the full floodplain reconnection can be very contentious. Agricultural production in these catchments is quite obviously the most important function, I think, here. And we can't always expect farmers to be giving over fields to this kind of thing. So there are kind of secondary options, I guess. You can work in the channel, create smaller terraces if you're not going to flood out, use the whole floodplain. You can create mini floodplains, little terraces. You can restore riffles. We've been doing this quite effectively now without having to import lots of material. Traditionally, I guess river restoration, as Charles says, is quite a new science or art, not sure which to call it. We have relied on the past in importing quite a lot of material to restore these habitats. We're finding that we don't need to do that with these rivers. They're not particularly powerful, they're never going to wash away in these structures. So we're trying to let them work for themselves a little bit. Trees for shade, becoming more and more important. There's quite a contrast again on these rivers. There's either very, very dense woodland, which is completely cutting out the light, or there's nothing at all. Trying to get that balance right of light penetration to the stream bed to let the plants grow, and to let everything that comes with the plants grow is really important. And we're also finding that backwaters, as part of these restoration projects, can be absolutely fantastic for biodiversity. Just little tiny channels attached to the river. They do help with silt management. When it floods, water spills instantly, it drops the silt. But you get a whole different fauna and flora in there as well. So that's pretty much all I'd like to say about the restoration work we're doing. I know a few of you are joining us on the Claven tomorrow, so I look forward to meeting some of you then. Thank you very much.